exceptional musician. Lots of drummers have drum solos. They can play drum solos all night long. But when it comes time to keep time with the band or swing the band, they just hopelessly fall down. But he combined the best of both worlds. He was a lovely man, an exceptional musician, a wonderful human being.
Woodger was something else, man. He had great taste, man. He was a hell of a drummer, and he had great taste. And he always knew what was most appropriate for the music. Great taste. And on top of all of that, man, he was a beautiful cat.
These black and white scenes are from the 1959 feature film entitled The Nonconformist. The drummer is Rael Woodger. My name is Chuck Niles, and this film will examine Woodger's life and career. Though he worked with virtually every major figure in jazz during his 30 years as a professional musician, Rael's face was rarely photographed. His name is not well known and appears in small print on only a handful of albums. Nevertheless, Rael Woodger left lasting impressions on the serious jazz listeners and will live forever in the hearts of his fellow musicians. Among them, trumpeter Bill Berry.
Rael was one of the most natural musicians I ever knew. He could, like, play with a big band or a combo or a singer or a piano player or anything you wanted. I don't think he ever had any lessons, but he was just a complete natural, and he could do it.
Drummer Sherman Ferguson regards Rael Woodger as one of his most profound musical influences.
Matter of fact, he had a habit. He used to carry a newspaper and some brushes around with him all the time. He'd go to clubs around New York like Bradley's and a couple other clubs around town. And if the cats were really playing, you know, the bass player was cooking, the piano player was cooking, he'd take his newspaper and spread it out, take his brushes out, and he'd play. And I, to this day, do the very same thing.
Although Woodger's professional achievements are legendary in jazz circles, there seems to be more than a little confusion as to his exact place of birth. Pianist-composer Nat Pierce.
Rael was born in Pender, Nebraska. Everybody knows that.
Bonist Buster Cooper.
No questions about it. Detroit.
Saxophonist, bassoonist Ray Pizzi.
He was born in Boston, I think.
Trombonist Slyde Hyde.
I think it was Oakland, California. I could be wrong.
Singer Jay Salerno.
I don't know. Was it Syracuse?
Trumpeter, singer Jack Sheldon.
Rael Woodger was born in Macau, and he was born in a place called, well, his mother worked at Wang's Thrill Palace, where you'd go and you'd pay him to see a guy killed. And if you get a family rate, you get a whole family killed.
Rael Woodger began his career in 1942. Having been rejected for military service, he joined Oscar Spoor's orchestra, which toured the Midwest dance hall circuit. Nat Pierce, also an alumnus of Spoor's band, remembers this period vividly.
We'd be traveling in the Midwest, playing the local country club, Elks Club, Knights of Columbus, all those wonderful places. And there would always be some wealthy doctor or lawyer who wanted to impress the townspeople and to have a party at his house after the gig. So this one night we went to someone's house, and Rael got a little stoned. So they decided they better put him to bed before he staggered all around the house everywhere. So they took off some of his clothes, and the room was done in white. white rug, white furniture, white bedspread, white bathroom fixtures. Everything was white. So in the middle of the night, Rael woke up suddenly. He had to relieve himself. He jumped up out of the bed and he knocked over an inkwell. So he staggered to the toilet where he thought it would be, and he missed. And he went around the other side. He finally found it, and he did his business, and then he staggered back towards the bed and fell asleep. He woke up again early in the morning when everybody else was asleep. He looked at this terrible mess that he had made in the room. So he put his clothes back on and made a beeline out the door, and that was it.
Well, a year later, he was back in Virginia at this tobacco baron's house. He wanted to apologize for what happened. So the butler says, now, come on in, sir, sit down right here in the study, and I'll call the man. So he walks in there, sit down, he plops down in his chair, and he felt something underneath him. He stands up and looks. Wouldn't you know there's a little dog in there that he sat on and broke his neck? Well, he didn't wait for the man. Needless to say, he didn't stay there. He didn't come back either. Fact is, he didn't come back to Virginia anymore.
Throughout the 40s, Woodger paid his dues doing one-nighters in every region of the country. And while Rael's musical gifts were obvious to his fellow musicians at the time, he developed a reputation for being somewhat unreliable. Sadly, this cost him a number of jobs. Ray Pizzi disagrees.
Oh, man, that's not true, man. You know, sure, he'd be late for, trains. He'd be late for buses, stuff like that, man. Leaders, they get all sorts of worrying, but this cat was never late, ever. He never missed a downbeat, man. He'd get there the very last second, but he'd always make the downbeat.
In 1950, Rael met Peggy Juarez, seated next to him in this photograph. Peggy, a well-known vocalist of the day, introduced Rael to a number of prominent jazz musicians, which helped him establish a new career as one of the most promising jazz drummers of the decade. Peggy and Rael were married later that year. Record producer Stanley Turgid knew both Rael and Peggy in later years.
He was a great drummer, a brilliant drummer, great musician, and she was a lousy singer, man. I mean, she was just really a lousy singer. She couldn't keep time. She sang out of tune. She got kidnapped once, and they let her go because she was humming in the trunk. One time, I guess they had been working together about a year, and they weren't getting along that good. The marriage was really in trouble, and Rael said to her, you know, there are three sexes: men, women, and girl singers.
Rael and Peggy were soon separated, and after a bitter divorce settlement, Rael was forced to take a steady job with Lester McKibben's orchestra, which was famous for its popular arrangements of hit parade tunes. Jack Sheldon recalls life on the road with Lester McKibben.
Then we joined Lester McKibben's band. Now, Lester McKibben, he wore just rouge and mascara, and he always wore a tux. When he woke up, he put a tux on. He'd come to breakfast in a tux. He'd eat at Denny's. He'd wear a tux at all times. And high heels. Wear high heels and those fish stockings, fishnet. He was actually quite an attractive guy. Had a real close shave, and I enjoyed working with the band. When he counted off the band, no matter what we were playing, he always counted at 1, 2, 3, and then you would come in. No matter what kind of tempo it was, he'd say, 1, 2, go! And then we'd play. So it was different that way. And if it was the wrong tempo, we'd go, 1, 2, oh, wait, and then, you hurt yourself almost.
Well, you remember how Rael was always late. The last night that he was on the band, he came back a few minutes late from the intermission, and he got on the bandstand, and the next thing, all the guys were laughing real hard, and Lester says, Rael, what did you say to these guys? And Rael said...
He said, the only difference between Lester's band and a bull is that the bull has the horns in the front and the asshole in the back. And also, Rael was mad at Lester paying the tickets to the Roman Spa.
Drummer Earl Palmer was acquainted with Rael during this period.
But then around the mid-50s, he got involved in drugs. But that didn't last too long either, because he found that being on the drugs, he was making trains on time. He made 3 trains in a row on time, and it ruined his image. So he quit the stuff and never touched it again.
Singer Betty Bennett.
Rael took this gig working in a pit band behind some kind of musical. He was very poor at the time. A job like that is so boring you can't believe it. Anyway, at some point in the action, he had to stand up and hit this gong. But one night, of course, he was so bored that he fell sound asleep. He awakened and he thought, oh, I've missed my cue. So he hits the gong, a really loud one, and all of a sudden he looks at the stage and the people are frozen on the stage. He realizes, of course, he's messed up and he's hit it in entirely the wrong place. So thinking wildly on his feet, he says, dinner is served.
Saxophonist Marshal Royal.
You know, there was a period in time when I was doing a little contracting, so thinking of Rael, thought I might bring him into the scene. So I asked him, not knowing his real quantities and qualities, I says, do you read music? He says, no. I says, can you read music? He says, yeah.
That sounds like Rael.
Trumpeter Pete Candoli worked with Rael as well.
In the early days, in the early 60s, Rael played with Guy Lombardo's band off and on. Said the band paid pretty good money, you know. It didn't swing at all, and I asked Rael one time if he was really happy with Lombardo's band. And he said, no, Mom, no, Mom, not at all, Mom.
In 1967, Woodger abandoned commercial music and soon reestablished himself as one of the most creative drummers in jazz. By all accounts, Woodger's playing showed new vitality and style. He plunged into a long series of tours with such greats as Louis Armstrong, Woody Herman, Dizzy Gillespie, and Duke Ellington. In February of 1971, an anonymous tobacco farmer died and left nearly $10 million to be divided among his 5 favorite jazz musicians, one of whom was Rael Woodger. So later that year, he staged a free jazz concert at the Hollywood Bowl, which lasted 48 consecutive hours. The roster of performers comprised the most impressive list of jazz luminaries ever to appear on the same program. And though attendance broke house records, Rael's inheritance had been spent, and no corporations expressed interest in sponsoring the marathon as an annual event.
Yeah, it was 71, right after he put on his jazz marathon, you know, with his inheritance money. And I ran into him and I said, hey man, I'm sorry that the festival didn't work out better, you know, for you. He gave me this very funny look. So he said, what do you mean, man? I got a chance to play with all the cats. I got a chance to hear some really great music, hang out with everybody. I don't know what you're talking about, man. It was great. So I thought about it, and he probably was right.
Six months after the Jazz Marathon, Rael Woodger was scheduled to appear at a concert in Montevideo, Uruguay. But, true to his nature, he missed the plane. And, to the bewilderment of all his friends, was never seen or heard from again. Where he went and what fate befell him remain a mystery to this day. In 1986, the Superior Court of California declared Woodger legally deceased. Thus ended one of the great legends of jazz.